Hello, I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and I want to thank all of our keynote speakers, expert moderators, panelists, and solutions sponsors for participating in this year's Insight Jam Live. This has been a big year with the launch of the InsightJam.com community site and the amazing growth of the Insight Jam YouTube channel, which now has over 500,000 subscribers. Much of this success is tied directly to the video events, podcasts, and panel discussions we have been producing, and none of that would be possible without the thoughtful participation of the many IT professionals who are generously sharing their expert insights for this latest jam. We are building Insight Jam to be a place to celebrate enterprise technology with best practices, expert analysis, and solution showcases. And we want all of you to join us there to keep the jam going into the new year and beyond. If you haven't joined Insight Jam, please do. And if you already have, take a moment to invite some of your colleagues. And again, thank you all for being here and enjoy this event.
Solutions Review presents the Insight Jam Expert Keynote.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for coming to my talk on securing our digital future and its impact on cybersecurity, the imperative of cybersecurity. So what I'm going to talk now is basically based on the blog which I wrote for CFO.universities, which is typically for the CFOs and the finance leaders. So what I did was I took that blog and I made it more kind of a generic, which is not specifically for the CFOs, but it's for the general audience, which could be from IT, supply chain, HR, and of course, finance as well. So that's what I'm going to talk in the next 25 minutes or something about how we can secure our digital future and the imperative of the cybersecurity here. Again, my name is Prashanth Southekal. I'm a data analytics consultant, author, and professor. I've been running my own company for the last 30 years, where I've consulted for some big names such as SAP, Shell, Apple, and GE, but at the same time, some small companies which are about 5 million in revenue. But what I have seen is whether I consult for big companies like the GE and the P&G or the small companies, the fundamental question is the same. How do we get value out of data analytics? The size, complexity, and scale might differ, but the fundamental question is the same. So that's what I have done pretty much for a living, consulting. I'm also a trainer. I've trained about 4,500 people in my 20-hour course on data and analytics. And I've written 3 books on data and analytics. My second book, The Analytics Best Practices, was ranked the best analytics book of all time in 2022. I'm a blogger. I've written many blogs for Forbes, SAP Insider, CFO.universities, Datavacity, and many other places. I'm also an adjunct professor at IE Business School in Madrid in Spain. So twice a year in May and in November, I work out of Madrid. I have a PhD, an MBA, and an ICD designation from University of Toronto. So what I've done for this presentation is broken down the whole topic into 3 major parts. The first one is, why is cybersecurity so important? When we hear the word cybersecurity, there is a kind of fear. There is a kind of a perception that this is a domain of IT people, so I don't have to worry about it, so on and so forth. So I'll just talk about the importance of cybersecurity, giving a few examples about why cybersecurity really matters in today's business environment. Then I'll talk about the solution, how we can secure our digital future. Okay, this is a growing concern. This is a growing area. This is a growing field which needs our attention. So what should I do about it? Then I'll talk about the solution part of it in the second part of my talk. And lastly, the call to action, the key takeaways from my talk. What is it you can do after you finish listening to my talk? So without much delay, I'll just go to the first part, which is the growing importance of cybersecurity. So most of you are familiar with the war that's going on between Russia and Ukraine, but most of them think that the war between Russia and Ukraine is all about tanks, is all about missiles and all those things. But in reality, the real war started 1 year before the actual physical war with bombs and missiles and tanks and everything actually happened. That was using the cyber warfare. Russia sent a bunch of hackers to attack Ukraine's digital infrastructure, and the same thing Ukraine did back to Russia as well. So today, when we look at cybersecurity, though we talk about when we talk about wars, for example, we talk about tanks and everything, but in reality, there is a virtual war that's happening between different countries as well. And the Russia-Ukraine war talked about that as well. So before the physical real war, there was a cyber war that was happening between the two countries. So this is where the cybersecurity is playing a very important role in today's world. So what's the growing importance of cybersecurity? So why is cybersecurity very important? So if you look at the top 10 business risk companies have today, this is a research based on Forrester's work. If you look at the number one issue companies have today, it's about cybersecurity, which is the data theft. So of course, they're also concerned about theft, money laundering, bribery, and all those things. That's all important for them. But the number one issue is about cybersecurity. That's the thing that's keeping the board, the C-suite, and all those senior management people awake at night, the cybersecurity and its concern. So what? Why are they worried about it? Because every 39 seconds, there is a cybersecurity incident happening in an average business enterprise. The cost of data breach in US alone was about 5 million of average cost. If you take all the data breaches that have happened in all the companies, divided by the amount by the number of companies, it comes to almost 5 million in revenue, 5 million in cost. Over 60% of the companies go out of business within 6 months of having a cybersecurity attack. Tripwire did one more study, and they said that the cyber crime is has increased from 3 million in 2015 to almost 10 trillion in 2025. And one more study which says that the companies which have experienced data breaches have seen the stock prices decline as well. So there is so much of impact that the companies have to face if they run into cybersecurity issues, right from reputation, right from monetary benefit issues, and even going out of business itself. So that's why cybersecurity is an important area, because it's one of the top business risks for some of the reasons which I've just listed here. So having said this, what is cybersecurity? Cybersecurity is a wide range of technology, process, and practices to protect the digital assets of the organizations. These assets could be your networks, it could be your servers, it could be your IT systems or applications, data, of course, all the devices like your PCs, like your tablets, your mobile phones, everything where you are using it to access the system, and of course, the user security as well. So I have put the 6 stages of or 6 elements within the cybersecurity, which talks about all the digital assets. The network security could be your firewalls, your VPN systems, and so on. Host security is all about the servers which you need to manage your data centers and everything. Application securities is all about your IT applications, whether it could be your SAP ERP or your Salesforce CRM and all those applications, or even Workday for managing your HR applications. This is all about making sure that the applications is secure and there is no vulnerabilities associated with this with the application. Data security, which is obvious, because ultimately the outcome of all the application which are used to run the business process is data. So data security is also important, because hackers especially, they're not really concerned about software per se. They're more concerned about the data, like your customer data, your competitors' data, and so on and so forth. Endpoint security is all the devices which are used to access the applications and the data, which could be your PCs, which could be your tablets, which could be your mobile phones, and all those things. And finally, about the user security, which is making sure that there is multi-factor authentication, there is single sign-on, there is role-based access control, there is a concept of least privilege, so on and so forth. So when we talk about digital assets, these are the 6 key elements within the cybersecurity framework companies are looking at to secure, so that the digital assets of the organizations are well protected. So this is basically the first part of my talk. What is cybersecurity? Why is it important? And so on and so forth. Now I'll go to the second part of my talk, which is all about the securing the digital future. What can you do to secure your digital future? So what I have done is I've taken 4 phases in your cybersecurity implementation project. First one is about defining the need. Number 2, assessing the risk that's available, that's present. Number 3 is about implementing the right controls. and lastly, about the governance part of it. So let's start first with defining this need for cybersecurity. The first step you need to do, why do you need cybersecurity? There are many drivers, there are many reasons for that. Is it about the government regulations, such as compliance to CCPA, which is all about privacy, or GDPR or HIPAA, and so on? Is it compliance to the industry standards? Is there some industry standards like Sarbanes-Oxley compliance for internal controls, or is it the payment card compliance, which is you have to take care for the industry standards? Is it the one that is driving your cybersecurity needs? Is there a need to protect your sensitive data? You have a lot of critical data, which could be about your competitors, about your markets, about your prospects, and everything. Is it to protect your sensitive data? Is it to ensure your systems are available? Because you run for example, it could be your oil pipelines, which are very critical. You need to protect the infrastructure so that the system is available 24/7. Or is it anything else? Find out those reasons that's driving cybersecurity. So second part of it, many times we do a good job on understanding the need for cybersecurity. But often I have seen in my projects, we don't do a very good job in understanding the why part of it. Why do we need cybersecurity? So what? What are the impacts of doing this? So that would be the second part which you need to think about. What is the impact of doing all those things? What are we going to lose? Or if we don't do it, why is that? What are the consequences of not doing it? And third one is why now? Why this has to be done now? What is driving the cybersecurity implementation? So these are the three major things which you need to figure out while you're defining the need. What are the drivers? What is the impact? And what about the timing? Why do you need to do it now? The second thing is about the cybersecurity risk. How do we assess the cybersecurity risk? There is a framework called as a RPN, which is a risk priority number, where you take which is a product of three major elements, which is severity, occurrence, and detection. And the product of these three numbers is your risk priority number. To assess this or to do this work, identify all the risk associated with cybersecurity. It could be associated with phishing. It could be associated with malware. It could be associated with ransomware. It could be your denial of service attacks, zero-day exploits, insider threats, or data non-availability, which is all about your disaster recovery and everything. So these are all the different cybersecurity risks which I have. Then for each of those risks, identify what is the severity of this issue, what is the likelihood of this issue coming, which is the occurrence, and how likely are you going to detect if this issue were to happen. For example, let's look at the second one, loss of data, which is a very important risk which companies have got. So how did I get 60, which is basically 5 times 3, which is 15, and 15 times 4, which is 60. So based on this, the number one issue which I have to concern or risk which I have is about the loss of data. So attack that first. And probably number 2 could be malware. Number 3 could be your phishing attack, so on and so forth. So this will also help you prioritize which are the cybersecurity risks which you need to address quickly, and so that you manage your resources pretty well. Let's take the first one, data security, because in the previous slide, we saw that the data security is the number one issue. And again, I have mapped it to the 6 phases of the digital assets, which we discussed earlier, which is right from network security to user security. So how would we address this problem? What are the solutions we need to manage data security? When we talk about network security, make sure that you have the right firewalls, you have the right systems for intrusion detection, prevention. For web traffic, you have the security in place, which is SSL and TSLs. There is virtual private networks and all those things. These are all the things which your network team has to take care. Okay, good. The networking is good. What about our servers? Make sure that the patches are updated. You have the data that is backed up regularly, whatever that frequency is, whether it's 8 hours, 6 hours, so on and so forth. So the second aspect to consider is about servers or the host security. Third one is about application security, which is your multi-factor authentication. Or what are the different ways you authenticate user access into your application? For example, I might use 2-factor authentication. saying that every time I access the system, it uses my email ID and password, plus it uses a 6-digit code which has come to my message in my phone. So I use two-factor authentication to access the application. Once I access the application, based on my role in the company, I get to access a particular feature of the application. For example, let's say I'm a purchasing manager. I can create and approve the purchase order. Now I am a clerk in accounts payable. So that means I can approve the invoices so that the amount gets paid to the vendor. So it's all based on the role-based access control. And I am a CFO. I can get more privileges about what's happening in the company, so on and so forth. So overall, role-based access control plays a very important role in application security as well. Data security, sometimes data is at rest, sometimes data is in motion. That means the data moves from one network to another network. So there are different data security techniques which you can apply. For example, data masking, data encryption, so on and so forth. For example, when I was consulting for Apple, I had to work on an SAP ERP application. For every sales order in SAP, I could see pretty much who the customer is, what is he buying, what is the price he has paid, and everything. But one of the features I couldn't see, or the data elements which I couldn't see, was about the credit card details of the customer. That field was available, I could see it, but the data point, the credit card number, was masked. So this is where the data security comes into the picture. Endpoint security is about the zero model trust, the zero trust model, which is basically ensuring that every device or user in the system is constantly authenticated and authorized. We also apply antivirus to all the devices which are there, all the tablets which are there, so that there is no virus that is getting into the network. And lastly, user security. How do you ensure that the users who are using the digital assets are applying the right security practices? It's by training, awareness, audits, monitoring, so on and so forth. So the data security in the previous slide, we saw that it is an important element, loss of data. How can we do it? So using different strategies across all the 6 layers of cybersecurity. The third thing is implementing the controls. So there are many cybersecurity frameworks which a company can use. There are plenty of them. So in the interest of time, what I did was I took the top 5 cybersecurity frameworks based on their strengths, limitations, and what kind of industries they are pretty much used for. In my experience, what I have seen is the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, CSF, is one of the most popular cybersecurity frameworks which is used. It revolves around 5 functions, which is to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. It is flexible. It is based on the risk, which we saw earlier in step number 2, which is all based on RPN, because cybersecurity is pretty much a risk-based function. So it is less prescriptive, and pretty much it is flexible for any industries, whether it's big or small, whether you are in retail or CPG or banking or oil and gas. So one of my most popular cybersecurity frameworks is the NIST frameworks. Of course, the number 2 would be the ISO 27001. It is pretty comprehensive, but it is very exhaustive as well. That's one of the limitations which I see. But if a company which is global in nature, let's say you have businesses in China, in India, in Middle East, in Europe, and in North America, then perhaps an ISO 27001 would be a good option. Well, one of my clients was based in France, and they were seeking my help to implement ISO 27001, which is basically, given their global nature, they had operations in France, they had operations in Canada, they had operations in US and China as well. So there are many cybersecurity frameworks. So I've listed the strengths and limitations of each of those frameworks, so you can pick the one which is suitable for your organizations based on your needs and your constraint. So with this, you implement this based on a framework, regardless of the framework which you have picked. Pretty much all the cybersecurity framework are based on this rule called as the defense in depth. So it's basically a fundamental element where if one thing breaks, there is something else to protect it. For example, on the top, ultimately you have to protect your data. That's the one people are concerned about. So you have the policies and procedures. If that doesn't work, you have the physical security, where you have access cards, where you have security guards and everything. Then you have the networks, which is all about the firewalls, VPNs and everything. Host, which is about your servers, you're protecting your host. Applications through role-based access control, through access of risk privileges, so on and so forth. And of course, multi-factor authentication, and ultimately you're protecting your data. So defense in depth is basically, if one layer fails, there is something else to protect you. So overall, we look at a bunch of different layers to protect your most critical asset in the company, which is data. And this data could be of any shapes or forms. It could be your reference data, which could be your categories, master data, such as your vendors, your customers, your GL accounts and everything, or your transactions, such as your orders, your invoices, your remittances and everything. So when you talk about data security, you are not just talking about transactions. We are talking about the whole suite of data which is there in a company, which includes your reference data, master, and transactional data. And of course, each of this data can be at rest or in motion. Lastly, governance. Once you have done it, it's not that you are done kind of thing. You need to govern all your cybersecurity policies, procedures, systems, training, and everything. Overall, cybersecurity is not like a one-time project. It is basically a process that requires proactive approach to stay ahead of the emerging threats, which is there. So these are some of the cybersecurity practices and organizations can typically follow. Provide training, build awareness to your employees about the risk associated from lack of cybersecurity practices. Develop an incident response plan to manage the cyber incidents. If there is an incident that is happening, how will you plan to address this? So come up with an incident response plan. Have a zero trust model, which we discussed earlier, where users and devices are continuously authenticated and of course authorized, and the access is granted accordingly. If possible, get an insurance policy to pay for any financial risk that might occur in the event of a cyber attack. We saw the cost of a cyber attack on an average is about 5 million or something. Come up with an insurance policy for any losses that you might incur in the event of a cyber attack. Conduct regular audits based on industry best practices. And if possible, onboard a full-time Chief Information Security Officer. We call it a CISO. Because today, every company is a data-centric company. Let's take Expedia, for example. Do you call Expedia a travel agency, or is it a data company? It's very hard to say. Moderna, which came up with the COVID vaccine, said that their success was based on leveraging data and analytics to come up with COVID vaccines quickly. So overall, today, every company is leveraging data and analytics to get improved business performance. So in that case, data analytics is one of the key assets or capabilities for a company. So having said this, given the amount of data companies are capturing and storing, you need a full-time person to manage your data as well, or to protect your data. They say by 2030, the amount of data in a company is going to double every 12 hours. So in that case, don't you need a person who takes care of your critical assets seriously? Cybersecurity, all said and done, is not like a part-time job. It requires full attention, the full dedication to make it really successful. So when you talk about governance, there is a fear associated with governance. Oh, it's expensive, it is time consuming, it is policing, it makes us slow and everything. But all those concerns are valid. But spare a thought about what would happen if there is no governance. I tell my clients, governance is like having the brakes in your car. The brakes in your car are not meant to slow you down. In fact, the brakes in your car are meant to protect you when things go wrong. The same applies for governance as well, cybersecurity governance. Cybersecurity is not meant to slow you down. It's meant to protect you so that you can use your data wisely and get good results from innovation, performance management, and everything. Overall, when we talk about cybersecurity governance or cybersecurity in general, you have to strike a balance between the protection of your digital assets, including data, and the innovation. If you are talking too much of protection, then the agility or the innovation aspects might be jeopardized. If you're talking too much of things like democratization, innovation of everything, and say, hey, we want to give the data to all our stakeholders, and let's say your people are not trained, they don't know how to use the data, and if unauthorized people are also using the data, then it might also jeopardize your competitive advantage. So overall, I call it as balanced governance or balanced governance when it comes to cybersecurity. You have to strike a balance between protection and innovation, so that you leverage the data and use it productively. So with this, let's talk about the call to action. Again, securing the future has got 4 major components. First is identify the need. Number 2, look at the risk using a concept called as risk priority number, which is a product of severity, occurrence, and detection. Number 3, implement the risk. You take some of the popular frameworks which are there, like ISO, NIST, so on and so forth, and use it. Or you could even come with something, a hybrid, a combination of ISO and NIST for your specific organization. And lastly, apply governance. And don't think governance is about policing, it's about control, it's about striking a balance between protection and innovation. So with this, I'll go to the last topic, the call to action, what you can take from this from this presentation. The first one, what I have done is I've broken down into 2 parts. The first one is about for you, what you can do after this. Protect your digital assets with multi-factor authentication, 2-factor authentication, and all those kind of techniques so that the right people are able to access the data. Change your passwords regularly and avoid reusing them again and again. Don't fall for scams. Educate yourself on phishing. Be a little bit smart when you get some kind of a strange message, so you don't directly go and start clicking on the link to see what's going to happen. And lastly, update or invest in cybersecurity training. Learn the latest things that are happening in this field of cybersecurity. So this is the call to action for the individuals. Number 2, what about the companies? What should the companies do? Understand that cybersecurity is not like a one-time project. You implement this and you are done. It's an ongoing process. Treat it like a process and not like a project. Have regular cybersecurity audits done and make sure that the data that is there is regularly backed up. Implement the zero trust model, which I discussed earlier, and be proactive. Lead the charge for the secured digital infrastructure. So this is what I call it as call to action, both for individuals and for the organizations. So with this, I'm done. Thank you very much for your time, and for those of you who have stayed long. So this is my gift to you, my discount code for my 2 books, Data for Business Performance and Analytics Best Practices, which I said earlier was ranked the best analytics book of all time. You can go to my publisher's website, techniques.com, put the promo code for whichever book you want, DFB 25 for the Data for Business Performance and ABP 25 for Analytics Best Practices. Thank you very much for your time. This is one of my favorite quotes, and MIT put my quote in their website. You have a lot of data today, but just capturing and storing data doesn't make you data driven. You need to use it smartly and securely. That's where the value of data comes into the picture. Thank you very much for your time. So I'm pretty active in LinkedIn. Please connect me if you are in LinkedIn. If you're not in LinkedIn, this is my email ID. You can reach out to me for any questions or comments. Thank you very much for your time, and all the best.
For video highlights, replays, and more, visit InsightJam.com.